Night Radio's Callaloo presents Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative, and yes, certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard only on Night Radio. First aired on Saturdays at 6 p.m. with repeat broadcast on Sundays at 9 p.m. You can catch us on the World Wide Web, www.nightradio.info. More recently, we've also been on Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course, Keith Jovi. Today, dear friends, is Saturday. It is the 26th day of October 2024. Welcome to another edition of your favorite program, Just Another Look. Today is the day before the official observance of the 45th anniversary of the independence of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But just how independent are we? What has been the relevance of independence for a nation like ours over the last several decades? Of course, there will be bells and whistles to mark the celebration. Buntings everywhere. Parties everywhere. All sorts of activities being held across the country, at home and in the diaspora. And one is not sure if really many of these activities reflect our independence. It is perhaps instructive that today, the 26th of October, the Prime Minister of this country has extended an invitation to the nation to witness the groundbreaking for the new hospital. Acute, he says, acute hospital. And it's instructive. But before we get to that point, I want us to take some time to reflect. Reflect of what we have been doing individually and as part of a broader CARICOM community. Where we are today as a Caribbean people. We have a Prime Minister who talks about the development of the Caribbean civilization. He seems to have quite a bit of problems, much like his other ministers, in articulating precisely what constitutes that Caribbean civilization. And so he markets it largely in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and sometimes in speeches here and there. But he does seem to have some challenges in terms of developing this concept enough for the average Vincentian to understand precisely what he's talking about. And one suspects that this year he will do the same. But he will go down in history for his first independence speech in 2001, when he attempted to give a sense of understanding the history of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But on that day, for whatever reason, when he arrived at the point of 1984, he hopscotched over that 17.5-year period that followed and picked up the pieces when he took over the reins of the leadership of the government in 2001. And history will record that in what ought to have been a momentous occasion, where a first-time prime minister would have been seen as seizing the opportunity to display an understanding of the role that he was to assume, having his party win the election. That instead there was a display of political myopia for which he will never be forgiven and for which he will always be remembered in a rather negative light. There is nothing he can do now that it will erase from Vincentian history the pathetic presentation of a first-time prime minister, seemingly incapable, or was it unwilling, to acknowledge 17.5 years of this nation's history, because it was led by a party that they had dethroned in the elections of 2001. So while on the evening of election victory in March of 2001, Gonzalez was able to at least make an attempt to suggest to the nation that the vicious election campaign between 2000 and 2001 should be put behind us as a nation. And he himself says, whereas in the election campaign the mantra was Labor now, in the post-election period the emphasis of the mantra would be together now. There is no evidence in the political history of Gonzalez since taking office in 2001 of any genuine attempt at fostering national unity in the strict sense of the word. So after 23 years in office, he's not in a position to hold up any examples of him and his government making any concerted effort at facilitating a country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that is together now. So just another look is saying, without fear of contradiction, that just as he has failed abysmally in respect of his portfolio of Minister of National Security, so too he has failed in his capacity as Prime Minister to fulfill what appeared on the night of election victory in 2001 to have been a commitment to the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines that he will have us together now. Instead, it has been a very, very vicious 23 plus years. So that our history will record that from the get-go, in terms of Gonzalez's speeches at independence, there is reason enough for people to turn a deaf ear. because his very first historic opportunity was blemished by that hiatus, that unexplained 17 and a half years in his presentation of the nation's political history. You see, there's one thing about history. It is that it records truth. It records truth. That is why there is so much emphasis now on rewriting people's history in the United States. Because in many respects, there are those who do not want to acknowledge the contribution of blacks who didn't ask to come to the United States, but who were forcibly brought there. In our situation, we were also forcibly brought out of Africa. We didn't ask to come here. But like other nations, we have grown. We have developed. And there is absolutely no reason for us to not want to speak unwholesome truth when we are talking about our history. But to appear on your first Independence Day, your first independence message as Prime Minister, to ignore a significant part of this country's history, which ran for 17 and a half years, is to fly in the face of truth. To ignore 17 and a half years of a nation's history is an unforgivable phenomenon. An unforgivable phenomenon. And the history of St. Vincent and the Grenadines will have it so indelibly recorded. You see, we have to have an understanding that the desire on the part of politicians to play with the minds of the electorate so that one can enhance one's image in terms of their perception of your leadership. That impact will forever be sullied by that first independence address. Everybody who understands history and anybody who took the time to reflect on and analyze, evaluate the 17 and a half years that we are talking about, from 1984 come on to 2001, would recognize the progress that was made under them. It doesn't matter what was the name of the party, it doesn't matter who was the leader. It is that there was significant progress made from what obtained before. But to skip over that is to kind of suggest it was not important, and that there is a level of consistency between where we were before 1984 and where we were in 2001, such that nothing happened then. We wallowed, we went back, and you will somehow take it forward. Well, let's look at it in reality. The state of affairs of the governance of St. Vincent in 1984 was such that the leader of the then St. Vincent Labour Party, Cato, virtually abandoned ship He called an elections that even caught his own people off guard. he caught his own people off guard. They were supposed to be meeting to discuss the budget. And the next thing you know, they recognized that they were incapable of preparing a budget that would have promoted the country and virtually abandoned ship. So if the truth be told as to where we were in 1984, and what transpired thereafter, you would recognize the transformation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines during that 17.5-year period. But there was something about the leadership that came to office in 2001 that appeared to have been rendered the leader seemingly incapable of acknowledging the realities of 1984 and the 17.5 years that followed. Was there political dishonesty? But if you said nothing about the 17.5 years, they may say, well, there's nothing dishonest about that because you just didn't choose to say anything and therefore they can't pick anything out of what would ordinarily have been said. But the very absence of addressing 17.5 years of progress in your own country, a country that you were going to lead and have since been leading for all these years, you determine, bro, what you want to call that. History will record it anyhow. And you will be judged forever by it. That is your reality. That is what the historical records will address, and address on the basis of truth. So as far as the leadership of this country is concerned, the independence message, first independence message of Raul Gonzalez as Prime Minister of this country in 2001, gave the nation a clear indication of his political intent. It may well have been an indication too of how he was going to seek to write himself into this nation's history. A bad start doesn't always lead to a good ending. So all of the years that we've had since then, all of the celebrations of independence, none of the independence speeches have risen to the level that is normally associated with quality leadership. None of them. Because none of them acknowledge the 17.5-year history between 1984 and 2001. None of them. And so how are we different in any way from what they were trying to do in the United States with their woke theories? If we accept what happened here with our own history from the vantage point of the Prime Minister of the country, who are we to criticize others who appear to be doing likewise with their nation's history? The gift of gab does not give anyone the right to attempt to gloss over a nation's history. Whether it be sordid, sullied, or beautiful, a nation's history remains what it is. And we keep saying to our people, in order for us to understand where we are today and to shape a better future, we have to clearly understand, analyze our history. But if we choose to ignore 17 and a half years of it, we are lying to ourselves. And successive generations as yet unborn will hold us accountable and responsible. That is the truth. That is the truth. So we have to understand where we have come from. And we have to understand the anxiety to build upon all of these experiences over the last several years. To have an understanding of what we have become as a people, as a nation. And where we are going. We have to understand why there has been so much emphasis on building buildings, on engaging in different infrastructure developments that seem to be done without the engagement of the people of this country, because an individual appears to believe that he and he alone has the right to determine what goes where, when, how, and why. And that is why we can say today, for many years, history reflected the insistence by so-called progressive elements in Caribbean society that England, the mother country, was overly anxious to rid itself of its territories in our region, if only because those territories had become decidedly burdensome. We did not engage in any major fight for independence. We were not at a point of being able to make great demands for our independence. England was at the time, as happened at the end of slavery, it was no longer economically viable as an industry. And so emancipation, while endorsing the work of those abolitionists and others of their ilk who saw slavery as dehumanizing, debasing, while we give them their share of credit, we also have to understand that the economic loss of viability of slavery as an economic endeavor, more than anything else, was the driving force for the emancipation of slaves and an end to the slave trade. More than anything else, an economic fact. Similarly, in the 1960s, while there were those who were advocates of independence from a philosophical and political standpoint, we have to acknowledge that economic considerations, perhaps more than anything else, was a critical factor in determining the granting of that independence by England to several of our Caribbean countries. None of them had to really fight for their independence. And there are those who, in their ongoing analysis of the realities of our Caribbean history, have an understanding as to why Haiti will be held aloft by advanced industrial nations as a failed revolution. It is being held aloft as such. And the rest of us in the Caribbean have actually abandoned Haiti. We rush with little CARICOM visits here and there. We rush when the world tells us, you need to help your own people. We don't see them as our people. Why? Because they dared to have a revolution of their own, to craft their independence on their own. It is not Haiti that has failed us. It is we who have failed Haiti and continue to do so day in, day out. We stand alongside the oppressive nations of the world and condemn Haiti day after day after day after day, unwilling to make any effort to understand that country and its people. Independence, in the case of many Caribbean countries, was less about a concerted effort on the part of the local populace to access their freedom, and much less on the colonial regime's desire to divest interests that had no longer proven beneficial to their own economy. In fact, that should be much more on the colonial regime's desire to divest their interests. We did not do ourselves any favors in seeking independence. In many instances, we simply joined the line and whined. We saw others do it. But in the process, we ignored the fundamental reality that we had an opportunity to unite, to have a common cause between 1958 and 1962 with the West Indies Federation. We had a brilliant idea, but perhaps we felt that the likes of T.A. Marichaud from one of the smaller countries of the Lesser Antilles, that he was not good enough to be sufficiently creative and to believe that he could bring this Caribbean of ours together. Myopia characterized the leadership at the time of this Caribbean region. And rather than seize the opportunity of a West Indies Federation, like crabs in a barrel, we argued and fought among ourselves as to who should lead, where the capital should be located. And rather than look at ways for us to build a Caribbean economy that would be strong, we found ways of insisting in a narrow-minded way that if these smaller islands were to be part of an arrangement and an agreement with their larger counterparts, they would ruin the economies of the larger ones. What political and economic rubbish. But our leaders bought into it and took us out of the Federation. The political and economic myopia characteristic of the political leaders of that era, many of whom we continue to elevate as heroes. They have us in the quagmire that we are today. And it is their legacy that has CARICOM the way it is today. Because the leaders that have followed have shown the same desire to prove themselves as individuals better than each other, more capable of doing more for their people than each other, rather than acknowledge, as the Europeans have found it possible to do, their common cause, the peoples of a region. So we sacrifice the Federation on the altar of political and economic expediency. The independence movement in the Caribbean destroyed an opportunity for us to hold fast to a common cause, a common objective as a common people. We rejected that. Our leaders on their own abandoned the peoples of the region and destroyed the opportunities we had for building solidarity and unity within our region. To what end? For the political sycophancy that we see characterizing what passes for leadership in the Caribbean today. That is where we are. And so the trek towards independence was done as individualistic entities because they were led by individualistic, egoistic leaders. The history will record that. Douglas Hall reminds us that Federation collapsed because the leaders sought to build something without the engagement of their peoples. They're still doing it today. The leaders tell you what they are doing and what they have done, not engage you in a fundamental discourse on what we should be doing as a collective. Even in every individual country, that is the state of play today, as it has always been. It is the reason that the international community laughs at us, scoffs at us. Because they look at us, even at the United Nations, and watch how each of the Caribbean leaders seeks to craft his or her own image and niche, trying to win friends and favors within the international community by their presentations. And they laugh at us. We fail to acknowledge that if Europe, with its diverse populations, nations around the region, can find it necessary, as many of them are advanced industrial nations, find it necessary to work together, to allow for their development as a collective, then what it is we didn't understand of the potential that Federation could have had and should have had for the development of our region. Now, after we have systematically destroyed the hopes of our people, the aspirations of our people, we're trying to rebuild it and talking about CARICOM and trying to build consensus around reparation. Less about the independence of our people and more about the potential resources, financial and otherwise, that we want to gather from those who once enslaved us. And even in that, we are divided. Because should we have the good fortune of today or tomorrow, the collective of those who engaged in slavery and utilized us and our predecessors to promote their own economic growth and their own political development, if they were to grant us financial resources in abundance by way of reparation, we will then see a collective dogfight among our current leaders as to who should get what how much? That is our legacy. And that is why many of us do not know what to do at independence. Political leaders continue to go on political platforms with half-baked military parades, knowing that they really don't have much of a military. But they do it anyhow because there are certain trappings they wish to keep. And for many of our leaders, it may well be a reminder to the population that we could take care of you. Because we are the lawmakers. And we are the arbiters of justice in our Caribbean countries. That is what we are. That is what we have become. So independence in the case of most of us has not really been based on an interest in being genuinely autonomous and in control of our fortunes. As we have seen for the last 23 years in this country, it is one encyclopedia and several exercise books. One individual ensuring that we have a system of governance dominated by he who swivels in the big chair. And then who then ensures that the deputy prime minister may well be little more than an namby-pamby representation. The young people within the ruling administration ponder if and when they will have a chance to lead. Stop talking about their potential and allow them to lead. It is the reason that others are asking for that opportunity to lead. It is the reason that they have not found it necessary to come to join, quote unquote, the stars. What stars? There is one star. That's why they can talk about the general and how many stars the general has. There is no array of stars. There is no constellation of stars in terms of the Unity Labour Party and its government. None. There's one star. But the star is going dim. And with it, the fortunes of the leadership of the party. So we are clutching at straws. We are clutching at straws, looking for a way to trudge along. Over the past several years, since official political independence was granted to this country, symbolized in the lowering of the Union Jack and the raising of the Vincentian flag, Vincentians have come to the realization of the fundamental challenges that a small island nation located in the Caribbean, open and vulnerable, must face if it is to survive in the international community. Evidence suggests that the post-independence experiences of Caribbean countries like ours have been at best decidedly mixed. Admittedly, some countries have fared better than others. But generally, however, the independent nations of the Caribbean have been waffling in the winds of change directed by the advanced industrial nations of the world. We seek refuge. We seek refuge in different ways and in disparate ways. It took several decades of Caribbean nations' independence before the heads of government at their 34th meeting of CARICOM heads in 2013 to finally establish a CARICOM Reparations Commission. 2013. 11 years ago. And they created the Reparations Commission as a regional body to establish the moral, ethical, and legal case for the payment of reparations by the governments of all the former colonial powers and the relevant institutions of those countries to the nations and peoples of the Caribbean community for the crimes against humanity of native genocide, the transatlantic slave trade, and a racialized system of chattel slavery. 2013. In 2014, they created a 10-point plan. Most people in the Caribbean don't know that. You know what's embarrassing? Most people in the Caribbean don't care to know it. So in the 10 points, they want a full formal apology. 2, they want an Indigenous Peoples Development Program. 3, funding for reparation to Africa. 4, the establishment of cultural institutions and the return of cultural heritage. 5, assistance in remedying the public health crisis. 6, education programs. 7, the enhancement of historical and cultural knowledge exchanges. 8, psychological rehabilitation as a result of the transmission of trauma. 9, the right of development through the use of technology. And 10, debt cancellation and monetary compensation. At the 10-point plan. 2014, they agreed on that. So now, 10 years later, the best we can do is lay claim to some minimal progress that has nonetheless failed to capture the support of the millions of youths taking control of our respective societies. Caribbean leaders today are like many of our cricket aficionados. They are old people. The people in the Caribbean who talk about reparations on a consistent basis are old people. Try as they must, they have nonetheless failed to convince contemporary youth of A, what constitutes reparations, B, why we need to have reparations, C, who would be the beneficiaries of those reparations, D, what would be the criteria used to divide whatever we receive in reparations. You see, because the Caribbean youths today, with greater access to all sorts of technology, ponder what it is about the leadership provided by Caribbean countries since independence that had left us so far removed from any collective action in terms of developing our region as a collective. We continue to bite each other's throat. We continue to negatively pull each other down. And that happens in every sphere of endeavor. Rather than compete collectively against the developing world, against the developed world that have always had us under their thumb, we first and foremost consistently compete against each other. We're fighting over crumbs, not the bowl of food. We're fighting for crumbs that fall off the advanced industrial nation's table. Look at us in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We have latched on to Taiwan as a crutch. There's not a week that passes that you don't hear several news items about what else Taiwan is doing for us. What else Taiwan is giving us. It's the reason we asked way back in 2001, what was the relationship between Gonzales himself as a political leader and China? Not Taiwan, China. It's why we asked the question, had Gonzales, on assuming leadership of this country in 2001, not recognized the amount of money that the government before, the NDP government, had received from Taiwan to do the library and some other works around the country? Had that not been in the kitty? And had he really, really received a bad hand from Eustace, as he tells the world, would he have still gone to China, to Taiwan, or would he have switched to China? That aspect of his politics remains up in the air. Check his political history. Would he have gone to Taiwan had there not been money from Taiwan in the kitty? And the surrogate role that we now seem to be playing to Taiwan really has to do with the fact that because of Taiwan's international situation, they need countries like us to speak up at the United Nations and elsewhere to get them to be recognized by the rest of the world. It is the reason why Gonzales cannot accept a one-China policy, in a sense, because then under mainland China, the terms and conditions of the relationship, of the kinds of assistance packages we continue to get with Taiwan, may not exist. To take advantage of the relationship you now have and use it for your best interests. And that is why, openly, he can talk to the electorate that if you vote another party in, that party will be riddled in debt, most of which will be to Taiwan. And they don't know how they'll pay it back. But you borrowed. So if your party in power, would they have to pay back because they continue to borrow? What kind of namby-pamby politics and economics is that? Why are you making the people believe that anything will be different in terms of how much money we have to pay back Taiwan? Once you're borrowing from a nation, you have to pay back. But is there a hint, that perhaps only you can continue to get those kinds of loans? And that only you can somehow, whatever relationship you have, get them paid back? Only you and your party? Only you. Only you could build airports. Only you could build wharves. Only you could build police stations. But you can't seem to stop and control the crime rate and murder rate in the country. So here's the problem. That you can dare to say publicly that the loans we have to repay with Taiwan will be a millstone around the neck of whoever takes power from the ULP. It is, dear friend, already a millstone around the country's neck while you are in office, because you helped put that millstone around our neck and you continue to do it. And that is why anybody with any modicum of sense, and like you like to say, rational being, looking at what just happened or what you want to celebrate this weekend, will understand the nature of your politics. You can't fix the problems with the healthcare delivery system that we have now. The Milton Cato Memorial Hospital, our leading hospital, is something of an embarrassment. So now you want to build a new one. The issues in respect of the challenges that are being faced by the healthcare delivery system is not going to change because you build a new hospital. But somehow you convince yourself, because you certainly can't convince anybody else, that a new hospital will solve the health problem. A new hospital will, for you, as Prime Minister of this country, be consistent with your own political history. You build things, people could see them, put up the fancy paint and everything, and people see them and they say, ah boy, we're making progress. We're making progress. But it doesn't change the price of eggs. It does not change the price of eggs. That is the challenge that we have, you know. So the World Bank advise you in terms of what they're willing to give you as a loan for the new hospital. Your acute hospital. But your financial situation is as acute as the hospital you want to build. But the offer from the World Bank does not meet with your approval. So you're not happy with that. You want more money. You want more money. And so you ask Taiwan for more money. You weren't happy with the offer from the World Bank. And then you turn around and bypass the tenders board and give a Taiwanese company the contract to build the airport, to build the hospital, so that the money actually just turns around the corner and goes back to Taiwan. Taiwan lends us with one hand from the government, and it goes to a company in Taiwan for the work of constructing the hospital. That is it. But what you want to do with the extra money? Will you show the people of this country how the extra money that you ask for, that you're getting from Taiwan, will be used solely for the purposes of enhancing that acute hospital and not solve your acute political problem politically where you want to win the next election? Will you provide the evidence of that? But then there's a challenge there, because remember, you know, people still waiting on accountability for the airport. I didn't really have to tell anybody how you spend the money and where you get the money from, and how much you spend there and how much you spend there. Really, if anybody else, if any other political party had asked to use the airport at Argyle while it was under construction for holding a rally, would they have been given it? Would they have been given it? It is not by accident that the big star ended up the center of attraction at the official opening of the airport. And when people raised issue about it, you had it removed. You don't know how it got there. You who know everything about everything, you don't know how the star got there. You didn't know how the star got there. But all your political life is about stars. So how come you didn't know how the star got there? As part of the celebration, which you said was about an international airport for the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But the star got there. So the contradiction, the contradictory omens in your politics have been exposed for what they are. And one of the most painful things that you have now is that young people have gone into the opposition party and are pointing an accusing finger at you to show your declining relevance to the future of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That is the most painful thing for you. And so now, in an acute economic situation and an even more acute political situation, you're endeavoring to use an acute hospital as the latest promotional activity for the survival of the Unity Labour Party, because it's survival mode that you are in. You know, we are talking reparation in the face of mounting economic crises across the Caribbean. The reliance on so many other countries for developmental assistance has us at the United Nations at every opportunity asking for more assistance to be given to us as developing nations. Everywhere we have become beggar maids. All that differs is who is begging. So reparation is needed now as much for economic support as it is for the philosophical and psychological matters that need to be urgently addressed. But even as we do so, even as we have formed strategic alliances with key stakeholders in the Americas, Africa, and Europe, and we boast of those alliances, not enough progress has been made on the issue of reparation. The reason being, A, that you can't get the young people to go with you. One young minister of government associated with education in one of our Caribbean countries shockingly expressed dismay as late as 2 years ago. I said, hey, we still talking that? I thought we passed slavery and colonialism and everything already. Why are we still talking that? When are we going to put an end to the discussion? And that is a young minister. That is the level of understanding of where some of them are. We boast of an education revolution. And we are ignoring the fact that it is products of that education revolution that are leading the charge in the committing of crimes and murders in particular in this country. Look at the young people who are engaging in criminal activity across the country. Look at it. They are products of the education revolution. Only one side of the education revolution. We forget that we're putting children out of school at the same pace as we used to in the past. But we don't want to talk about the dark side. We only want to talk about the bright side. But they are products of the education revolution. The lawyers that we have are products of the education revolution. But we get upset when young lawyers challenge the status quo because they recognize that how fair it is questionable. They too are asking for a change, a genuine change in the current dispensation. Young people. So you have no youth council at the national level. You have no real student council at the national level. Yet you claim that you love them so much you want them to be involved. You want them to be engaged. What you really want is for them to join your party and vote. That's what you really want. But they look within your political party and recognize that the young people are getting old without getting the concomitant responsibility and leadership roles in your organization. There's nothing there for them that suggests that there is a developmental pathway that leads to something at the end of the tunnel. Here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we can hardly claim any measure of progress in respect of reparation. We certainly have not been able to generate any enthusiasm, with minimal exception, for the cause. Vincentians have been unable to agree on the multifaceted impact and legacies of slavery and colonialism on Vincentian society. We are still at a stage where we are unwilling and decidedly scared to accept that racism still exists in our society. One has only to take the time to explore and analyze what obtains around us. Vincentians may well be confused as to whether colonialism has in fact come to an end in this multi-island nation. The late Ivan O'Neill, God rest his soul, often bemoaned the specter of St. Vincent and the Grenadines being seen as a surrogate of Taiwan, if not a colony. And indeed, some people wonder whether over the last 20 odd years we have not become St. Vincent and the Grenadines of Taiwan. You see, the recent and embarrassing spectacle of the government of this country and the financing and ultimate award of contract for the construction of the quote-unquote acute hospital at Annas Vale is worthy of close analysis. You see, we tend to be lazy intellectually. We try to avoid getting into the dynamics of evaluating, of analyzing, of critical thinking in respect of things that are happening in our society. Because we are also fearful that any sort of critical analysis that does not lead to a conclusion that is supportive of the ruling administration, the individual thinking such will become a target. That's the belief in this country. You see, the government appears to have already made up its mind in respect of the value that it has placed on the acute hospital. The political value is what they are concerned about. The political viability of seeing a new project where so many of our people traverse, crossing from one side of Annas Vale to the other, across the old airport. That location is ideal in terms of political currency of the project. They will watch it grow. Even as the economy fails to grow, they will watch the building grow. And so they'll be able to say, yes, we're making progress. But you know, we have forgotten that recently there's an article in Eyewitness News about a woman who lived in England and who just lost her sister here. headline, the Eyewitness News article dated the 19th of October, was UK Vinci, who defended SVG's healthcare, left embarrassed after sister dies at the Milton Cato Memorial Hospital. Yeah? She defended the healthcare system of this country. And now she's saying that she felt embarrassed after her sister died at the hospital without receiving the medical report that her insurance company needed to fly her overseas. Her advice: you know, she says, you hear all these things, how people spoke about the hospital, but to come down here, she says, and to experience that all they're saying is true, another situation. But this occurred because her sister died. She was trying to get medical attention for her sister. And she is convinced that the sister died because of our healthcare delivery system. She deems it inadequate. And you see, this case reminds us, remember the story of the 9-year-old boy whose mother was trying to get help? She was trying to raise funds. And how after getting so much licks on the media, the Prime Minister came and says he heard that the mother may have visited his office or tried to reach him. For whatever reason, they didn't connect. But his response then seemed to leave us with the impression, if we are reading it correctly, that it is only him. They had to go to him. That's the impression you got when you heard his own explanation in the aftermath of the death of the young boy, whose mother was trying to get him out of the country for medical treatment. Only him. In 2024, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, after all these years of independence, governance is about one man's leadership. It is about one man's leadership. Everything appears to have to go back to one man, the man swiveling in the big chair. That's the kind of country we're running. So what is he going to say that is any different when we are dealing with our independence celebrations? It is not about country. It is about I. It is about what I want to do. You heard him speak. The Independence Rally for Students. Everybody is happy that more students are getting scholarships and bursaries and whatever else. But if you listen carefully, it was I. You He says, when I made the promise last year when we were here, I told you I will give you more. And then he went on to say, well, and you could be confident Ralph will find the money. It's not my government will find the money, you know. It's Ralph will find the money. So we continue to have a sort of benevolent dictatorship where one man can proudly articulate that he makes it possible. There's no we in I. There's no we in I. So, in 2024, when he came into office in 2021, in 2001, we are 23 years later, and we have had 23 years of Aymanist leadership. 23 years is long enough for every young people within his party to get old. And for him still to be talking about I. You see? And the nonsense that he's talking about. So he's comparing himself with St. Lucia. St. Lucia had five prime ministers while I here. 5 prime ministers while I here. So, the idea that, you know, I mean, give me a break. Right? So, what is the point? What exactly is the point? Where's the value of the point? You know? So I don't understand, and you probably can't understand exactly what is the value of that. You know, what's the value? You have an acute situation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines in so many areas of national development. Your own political viability is under threat. You could not be happy with people of a particular constituency chanting Saboto, Saboto when they expected you to have tendered your resignation as leader of the party, handing over to a younger person. But you stayed on. And we said then, ain't no way Saboto name going to come up again. And each week that you listen to so many news stories, all starting with Prime Minister Gonzalez. Prime Minister Gonzalez, you don't hear him mentioning Saboto name much, if at all. When last have you heard him speak about Saboto and the developments taking place in agriculture? But this is independence. And you can rest assured that you will get another Aymanist presentation. Because I run things. Because I swivel in the big chair. Because I don't lie. Because I get things done. What you've done is build a political monolith, not a democracy. And so we say that as we celebrate fact, there's nothing to celebrate. As we observe yet another year of independence, we can ask ourselves, where are we? And where are we headed? Because try as we wish, economist Trevor Farrell used to say to his students at the University of the West Indies that the Caribbean, the number of rocks that popped up within the Caribbean Sea, and which, when you look at it, may well not have been intended for human habitation. And as you look around the Caribbean, most of the Caribbean countries have more people living abroad than there are at home in their respective countries. If all of them were returned home or were sent home, what will happen to our respective countries? We'll all be overpopulated. We'll all have challenges making ends meet. That is why so much of our respective economies, bolstered by remuneration from abroad. Many people would not have been able to keep their heads above water economically if they did not have relatives abroad sending monies home to take care of. And so sometimes you have to sit and listen carefully and apply your critical thinking skills so that when independence comes around, and when independence comes around, as we heading into a next general election, we get all kinds of promises, all kinds of promissory notes, and they come against the backdrop that I delivered. I had promised this, and you got it. I had promised that, and you got it. So keep me in office, because I will make it happen. Unfortunately, it is not we will make it happen. And sometimes there's a belief that there's nobody to come after him to fill his shoes. So where are we headed? As we observe yet another anniversary of independence, we call on our Vincentian population to think long and hard of what independence has done for us as a nation. To think long and hard as to whether, even if we were all to get reparation, if we would be able to do any better than we are doing now, given our selfishness, our insularity, our vindictiveness, and our commitment to a crabs in the barrel philosophy. How much are we prepared to work as a collective in this Caribbean of ours? For indeed, unless we come together as a region with a common cause, ignoring the boundaries set upon us by the sea, but understanding our shared history, our shared experiences, to create a geographical space of love, peace, harmony, solidarity, unity, we will remain forever people moving forward on our knees with our hands outstretched as mendicants. Survival for these Caribbean islands inextricably wrapped in getting together. But equally, it begins with getting a nation together. Individually, we must each become whole. We must each become unified in order to be able to reach out and hold each other's hands so that in this Caribbean geographical space, we can become one. Enough said. You've been listening to another edition of Nice Radio's Callaloo presentation, Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative, and yes, certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard on Nice Radio at 6 p.m. on Saturdays, 9 p.m. on Sundays. But you can also find us on Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course,